And I recommend if you're going to travel into a non-carry state, you are well versed in what their transportation laws are, because that's the most common place or instance in which you're going to get into trouble. Welcome back, everybody, and thanks for viewing. A couple of videos ago, we were talking with Kayla about obtaining a concealed carry permit in the state of Ohio. We briefly touched on the concept of reciprocity agreements during the course of that conversation, and Matt and I thought it would be a good idea to maybe do a little bit of a deeper dive on what all of that means. What it means is you're going to have to be well versed in the laws from the particular state that you live in. We're a little Ohio-centric, obviously, because that's where we live. And I can tell you that as of March 23rd, 2015, Ohio accepts the handgun license from any resident of any other state, including New York, Illinois, and states that typically do not accept Ohio's, which is the whole basis of reciprocity to begin with. Essentially, a reciprocity agreement is, does your concealed carry permit allow you to carry in another state? Well, in most cases that's true. Unfortunately, unless you're talking about a state that's heavily blue. Some of the ones that come right off the top of my head are Illinois, New York, Rhode Island, Washington, D.C. A lot of the New England states don't accept out-of-state residents carrying guns. In fact, it's really difficult for their own residents to obtain a concealed carry permit. So essentially it works like this. It's up to the carrier to know not only what states they're legal in, but specifically what the laws are in the state they're traveling to. I recently had to renew my concealed carry permit. When I did, the state of Ohio sent me this very handy little card, and we have a video of the card. And what it basically tells you is the states that I am not allowed to carry in. Very handy. Now it also has the cliff notes on where you're not supposed to carry your gun in the state of Ohio. Not going to cover those details. Most of the people that are permitted carriers in Ohio already know that, and if you live in Indiana, you probably don't care. Which brings us to another point. If I travel to Indiana, must know what the specific laws are there, because they won't match this. I'll almost guarantee it. They won't match it perfectly, meaning, for instance, in Ohio, you're allowed to have your gun in a liquor establishment as long as you're not drinking. That may or may not be true in Indiana. Now, a word of caution. Most people blow off the point where everyone encourages them to do that research. That is a huge mistake in today's political climate. Whether you believe the justice system is weaponized or not, I can tell you this. If I'm a prosecutor trying to look tough on crime, and specifically gun crime, and I have the chance to ring up an out-of-state resident that has nothing to do with my constituency, guess what I'm gonna do? Probably ring that bell pretty hard. So this day and age is not the time to be uninformed. Even if you use your weapon, Lord forbid, in a legit circumstance, you could potentially be prosecuted. But what typically happens is people are stopped, pulled over, have some other fairly benign interaction with law enforcement, and that's when they get caught illegally carrying the firearm. You also have to be very careful about reciprocity agreements related to use of gun in the car, meaning carrying the gun in your car. It could be true that you travel through states, say Indiana, and the next state over you're not allowed to carry. You also have to be careful about how it is they would like for you to transport the firearm in that state. You're legally required, obviously, to get out and do some sort of realignment and remove the gun from your person, perhaps put it in the trunk, and always keep the gun fully unloaded in states like that. It will keep you out of trouble. Classic example of that is originally Kayla's from Iowa. When they want to travel from Ohio back to Iowa, you typically have to drive through Illinois. What she's required to do is stop prior to entering Illinois, make the gun fully unloaded, put it in its case, and essentially what law enforcement is looking for is that she would have to exit the vehicle to marry up the ammunition and the firearm. Not terribly convenient when you consider after she leaves Illinois, should she want the gun back on her person, You'll have to do the whole thing in reverse. Now, I recommend you do that. And I recommend if you're going to travel into a non-carry state, you are well versed in what their transportation laws are, because that's the most common place or instance in which you're going to get into trouble. Being illegal in non-carry states can easily be punishable by up to years in prison on the first offense. Typically, whether you're red or blue, the states that don't allow carry from other states are usually some of your higher crime areas, depending on where you are. Sure, Southern Illinois, much like rural Ohio, but around Chicago, they're going to play hard, and they can recognize people that are carrying illegally. They can. That's what they're trained to do. That's a basic tenet of law enforcement, is spot the guy with the gun. Obviously not in your car, but if you're out in public. It's nothing to play around with, and the interesting thing is, all of the information is available online. Most states are very, very detailed about their gun laws. You can get the Cliff Notes in a card. There's websites in Ohio, Buckeye Firearms Training Association, where you can see the map of reciprocity agreements and even look up what the specific laws are in other states. And with summertime travel upon us, I recommend that you do that. All of this reminds me of a famous 2A case that came out of the District of Columbia some years ago. Basically what happened was the local authorities decided that it was against the law for this particular individual to carry his firearm or transport his firearm in the car to a range. Memory serves, I believe it made it all the way to the Supreme Court. That's how insane some of these laws can get. And particularly in Washington, D.C., if you're going to be in that area, there will be protests. There will be a lot of civil unrest this summer related to the current events in Israel and the upcoming election. Please be well versed on what the laws are, where you're going to travel to. The tightrope you're walking is those are just the types of situations where one might want their firearm. I can't lend you any other advice than please try to be a law-abiding citizen and do your best with it. It's a difficult situation for sure. Making matters all the more difficult in Washington is they do not accept any permits from any other state. Your options are to actually apply for a carry permit in the District of Columbia. I don't have any experience with how successful one would be with that. I suspect probably not at all, unless you can show that you're there all the time, perhaps a part-time resident, or have some business that takes you to DC all of the time. If you're a transient visitor, I would say probably not. You have a better chance of finding an uncrooked politician than obtaining that license. I totally believe that every human on the planet has the innate right to self-protection, but you do not want to run afoul of the law if you don't need to. Hopefully, none of this information will discourage anybody from carrying their weapon with them as they travel about this summer. It's really as simple as knowing what the rules are and following along. If you guys like what we're doing, don't be afraid to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.